Hi, it's Shannon here from houseimprovements.com. Today we're going to do a video on hanging drywall. We're going to talk about the different aspects of not only doing the ceiling, starting with the ceiling, doing the walls, and some of the basic tools you're going to need to perform these tasks. So we're dealing with a mocked up situation that we've used for a couple videos now. We've got a framed 2x4 wall here. We're just going to say that it's all insulated, ready to go. We're going to drywall it. We've got an arched opening here. We've got a doorway. We've got a plug-in. Just a couple of different things to try to show you what to do when you're dealing with that situation. We're going to be using standard 1/2-inch drywall. You have a few options when it comes to this. You've got some moisture and mold resistant drywalls now that you can use in damp locations like bathrooms, kitchens even. You've got the standard drywall that we'll be using today, and you've also got a special ceiling board made just for doing ceilings. It's a little more rigid, a little more weight to it, but it's a lot less sag resistant between trusses and that, so anytime you're doing a ceiling you definitely want to use it. Some of the tools you're going to see us using today, we're going to use a drywall saw. So this will be cutting out windows, cutting out round plug-ins, that sort of thing. So we've got that. We're going to use just a normal snap blade utility knife. We'll also be using a drywall square, and this just works like a building framing square. You can slide it along the sheet, make nice straight cuts with it when you're cutting off the ends and that sort of thing. We're going to use a cordless drywall screw gun. There's a few different brands out there that you can get. You can get corded ones as well. You could also, if you already have an existing cordless drill, there's attachments that you could put in called a drywall dimpler, and it just simply goes into your existing chuck, and it'll have some adjustment on it for setting the depth of the screw, so you're not trying to fine tune every screw. It simply clutches out and releases when it gets to the right depth. When you are putting screws in, you want them to go in far enough that they're just dimpling the surface a little bit, not actually tearing the paper, but leaving a little bit of a hollow or an indentation there in order to properly mud it and cover that screw. One of the other tools we're going to use is a drywall lifter. This actually goes down on the floor, you hook your foot in it, and it's like a teeter-totter. You get it under the lip of the bottom sheet of the drywall, and it allows you to get some leverage on that sheet to get it up tight to the top sheets. So kind of the process of drywalling, of installing drywall, is you would want to, whenever you can, do your ceilings first. So put up all your ceiling board, get it all in place, and then you'd go to your top row of your wall sheets, and then followed by the bottom row. So with the ceiling part, you've got a couple major tools that really can help that, or one major tool that really will help that process out, and that is a drywall lift. So a mechanical device that actually, once you've got the sheet loaded on there, you can crank this right up tight to your ceiling. I believe this one goes to like 11.5 feet or something like that. You lay the sheet on, crank it up tight. You've got some portability with it, so you can move it around, do some adjustments, get it cranked up, and it'll hold your sheet there while you're getting screws in or cutting out holes or anything like that. It's a real back saver. This kind of takes drywall in the ceiling from a 3 or 4 person job to really two people can do this. And really the only reason you need the second person is to help you get the drywall onto the lift. Ceiling board in my area, I don't know about everywhere, but generally only comes in 12-foot sheets, so it gets pretty heavy to be holding up over your head. The basic idea behind this lift is it's got a few features built into it. You've got the deck up here. This is what the drywall is going to sit onto. Each end has some adjustable arms that come out depending on the length of sheet you're dealing with. The whole setup flips down like this, and we're going to show you this in a few minutes, but it flips down so you can actually load your sheet on here. The face of the sheet, the good side, sits against here and down on these hooks. Once you've got it loaded on there, simply flip it up into that horizontal position, lock the head in place so it won't tip on you. You can maneuver the whole unit around wherever you go. It's got lots of different movements in it to get it around whatever you got to do. And then it's got basically a winch and pulley type system over here where you can crank it up. You can stop it. It locks in at whatever height you need it to. Wheel it around some more. Crank it right up tight once you've got it to the full height, and lock it in again. And then once you've got the screws in it to hold the sheet up, you roll it back down and load your next sheets. So a couple things to remember for ceiling board is on ceiling board you want to have at least 5 screws across every truss or every ceiling member, floor joist, whatever you're actually screwing it to. Where as opposed to on a wall you can use only 4. You can use more than that, but you only need 4. But it's recommended to use 5 on the ceiling, just because you've got all that weight hanging there. And very important as well on the ceiling when you're inserting the screws to not over tighten them. You don't want them ripping the paper, because right away that's a weak screw. It's not holding really any weight. It's amazing what the face of that paper will support as long as it isn't torn. So we're going to get ready. We're just going to show you how to load this drywall. We're going to give you an example of putting a sheet of drywall on the lift. We don't have a scenario where we can actually install it on the ceiling today, but we're going to show you loading it on, getting in position, and how easy it is to crank it up once it's on there. We're also only using 8-foot sheets just because of the space that we're dealing with. So I'm just going to get this ready here, and then we'll grab a sheet and put it up here and give you a bit of a demo. Another important thing I can mention is that these units are generally rentable at most rental shops, so you don't have to go out and spend, this type model here I think was around a couple $100. They aren't super expensive if you're doing a lot of work, but you can also rent it for projects where you only need it for a day or something like that. In a small room, they're not really that great. It's almost more cumbersome. But if you're in a room, 10 by 10 room even isn't too bad, or 10 by 20. But you start getting under 10 by 10 and the machine is just too cumbersome to use in there on its own. So we've got this ready. We're ready to load. We've got the support arms down. We've got it flipped up there, and we're going to grab a sheet. So as you can see, we're putting the good side against the lift. Try to center your sheet as much as you can on the unit itself. Lay it over. Flip these arms back up out of the way. Lock the top swivel unit into place, and this sheet would be ready to move. So now you can see I can. I'm not going to lift it real high here, but I can lift it right up, lock it in place, and it's good. We can swivel it side to side, back and forth a little bit, and we can wheel the whole thing. So super back saver. You could make up wooden T-post to kind of do the same thing, so that once you had a sheet held up, a couple guys could hold it up, and then you stick your T-post supports underneath. That works. There's nothing wrong with that. This is a much easier system if you got the space for it. So I'm just going to let this back down. Okay, so that's how you would basically deal with the ceiling. Like I said, we don't have that mocked up here today. We've only got a wall and a couple things like that to go. So we're going to get this out of the way and show you how to start drywalling on a wall. Okay, so we already went over what to do on the ceiling, and we're going to go straight to installing some drywall on our mocked up wood wall here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut our first piece at 4 feet, because 4 feet actually works out to a stud here. One of these studs over the window works out to the center. You always want to put your butt joints, which this is the butt joint of a sheet is the square ends of the sheet. You'll never see it from the video, but on the long edges of the sheet is a bevel joint. It's actually concaved here a little bit, so that when you do the mudding on all the long joints, you can pretty much flatten them right out. So this is the butt, and this is the bevel edge. If you hear me refer to that now, you should know what that means. We're going to hang the sheets horizontally here. Some people will stand them on end, but it's usually recommended to hang them horizontally to give better strength to the wall. We want to stagger our joints at least a couple stud spaces if we can. So by that I mean if we have a joint right here in the drywall over this window, we wouldn't want the other joint in the lower row to be in the same spot. It's preferable to stagger it to give more strength to the wall. When you are putting joints around windows or door openings, it's preferred you don't put a joint right out here at a corner or something. That's usually going to crack on you just from the wall moving a little bit when the door is opening and closing. You want to put your joint over the window or span the sheet right past the door or window so your joints are on either side. It'll just make for a better job for you. It'll stand up better. So I'm going to use the T-square here, and I'm going to cut this piece of drywall off to 4 feet, and then I'm going to hang it. Then we're going to take a full 8-footer to finish off the upper row. So we'll put our 4-footer up, we'll put the 8-footer up, butted tight in the joint, and get everything screwed up there. Then we're going to install a full 8-footer on the bottom row. We've got a plug in here to cut out in the top row, and we're going to cut this one window out with a roto-zip, which I didn't show you earlier, but we will discuss it before I go to do that. So I'm going to cut this then. So basically this square is set up that it'll just hang right on the top of the sheet. I'm going to hook on the end here. I'm measuring over to 4 feet. In the scenario we're doing, we've got an outside corner over here that we're going to shoot a different video on about installing round corner bead, bullnose corner bead. In those cases, you need to keep your drywall back 1/2 inch, so you don't want your drywall to actually lap there. If you're putting on square corner bead, we'd put on this sheet, and the second one on the other side of the corner would come around and overlap it like so. So we're keeping back. So I'm just going straight 4 feet. I'm just simply using my Olfa knife, my utility blade knife. I line my square up to the line I have. Do you want to reposition? I'm going to line my square up to the pencil line I have. Just hold the square basically from sliding around on the sheet. I'm going to put my toe down here on the bottom of it, keep it from moving on me. And I'm just going to score that paper with my knife. Okay, so we get a good score in there. And generally, as long as you've cut the paper and you know, about 1/3 of the way through the actual gypsum, you should be able to move the sheet just like that, and it should split open for you. Then if you take your blade and insert it on the back side where the crease is, and cut the back paper like that, finish it off like so. You've cut it all up. Now, you know, that's pretty easy to cut. It's pretty easy to deal with. You get a little bit of dust all the time. We've got actually a pretty clean cut. You can use the back side of your blade a little bit just to clean off any little bumps or lumps you got on there. We're always going to try to put a factory butt joint or butt end together instead of one that you've cut, but it's always nice to clean these cut ones up too so they look good. So that's really all there is to cutting that. It's pretty simple. We're going to take this piece over. I'm going to turn it so I get my butt joint, factory butt joint where I want it. Get myself in position. Now we want to screw right into the studs. Something that will help you out as well is if before you start mounting the drywall, Just go up to your ceiling and mark the center of all your studs so that once you have the drywall on there, you actually can visually see where your stud is so that you can hit it every time with your screw, hopefully. This is a little different situation because we've got a window and everything in there, but I'm just going to mark a couple more of these so I know where they are. Okay. So then I'll get my drill handy here. And these are a magnetized end, so the screw will usually hold on there for you. I'm going to take my 4-foot sheet here, push it up tight to the ceiling, flush it up here to the end of the wall, or to our outside corner that we have, and get a couple screws in it so it's hanging, and then I'll finish screwing it off. Now usually once you get a couple screws in there, it's going to kind of support itself until you can get some more in there. And then you can, once you got it hanging there, you can go ahead and finish screwing that sheet off, and then we'll get ready to hang the next one. Okay, so we've got our little 4-footer hanging there now. I've got it screwed off. It's a little flimsy here because it's, a good chunk of it's out into that window opening, arched opening there. You can see on the regular studs I placed 4 screws across the width. At the ends or any joints I put 5 screws. So we've got that. Now I'm going to come over here to this sheet. This 8-footer is going to be the upper sheet right here. We're going to have to cut a plug-in into it, so I'm going to show you how to cut that mark it out and cut it with the drywall saw. So because we are putting this sheet up against that one, we can use it as a reference to measure to. So I'm going to measure this all out. I got 39 and 41. I've got this sheet upside down right now just to make it easier to work with. So I've got my width. I can measure down from the ceiling. Like so. And we're going to end up cutting out this little corner right here out of the drywall. We also need to put a little tab in it for the screw mounting ear there on the box. So pretty simple. We've got it marked out. We're going to cut right on the line. And I'm actually going to angle my saw a little bit like this so that I'm cutting wider at the back side. That just gives us a little bit extra play if our measurements aren't quite right or anything. We can, usually get it up there without doing any damage to the actual front surface. So this would be straight in at 90 degrees if I cut like that. I'm going to bevel in, 22 degrees or 30 degrees, something like that. I'm just going to simply cut straight down till I get to my horizontal line. Same thing on this side, beveled back. That's loud. We've got our 2 sides there. Now to make this cut, I can just score along there with my knife, bend that back, cut it out of the way. Now I can either take the saw or the knife and cut this little ear out of there. If you were cutting it out in the middle of the sheet somewhere, you'd use the saw to make all those cuts and then just simply pop it out of the way. We are going to show you on the window opening using a roto-zip electric tool to cut it out, and we may even show you using the saw on part of it too. But you could use the roto-zip on these switches as well, on these metal boxes, as long as you've got a nice square box with not a lot of tabs or anything on it. So Once you get used to the RotoZip, you'll probably want to use it more often. So we're going to just get reset here in a position to hang the sheet and get it screwed up there. Okay, so we've got the sheet flipped around now, and I'm just going to get some help here to apply it on the wall, and hopefully it all fits around the switch box. So we're just leaning the top against the wall, pushing it up tight. We're getting our butt joint down here tight, and it's a beautiful fit on the switch. Just get a couple screws going. Okay, and there you can see it usually doesn't take a lot of screws in it just to get, kind of hold the weight and get it up there. So we've got a few screws along the bottom. I'm going to go ahead, finish screwing this sheet off, so you'll be able to kind of see what we're doing. We'll maybe get a close-up later of the depth of the screws so you have an idea what they should be doing, and as well as nice tight fit on the butt joint around the switch box, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep screwing. If need be, if you're not real confident on hitting the studs every time, you could use your drywall square and mark a faint pencil line. Measure it all out and mark a line where the stud actually should be, and follow the line if you are afraid of missing all the time. Can help you out. Now I just have to remember over the doorway I can't come down a whole far amount because we're just got the header down here, so it should be somewhere in here. Put a couple across the header. Okay, so we've got it screwed off. I've got one more row left there, but we won't worry about that today. Got all my screws in. I put my screws a little tighter together on that little bit of a joint we have above the window there. And yeah, so we'll get a couple close-ups of that, and then we'll get set up to do the bottom sheet, bottom row. Okay, so before we get the bottom row in place, I decided that I'd show you how to use the RotoZip, or this isn't the RotoZip brand, but same idea, to cut this drywall out of this opening. A couple things to remember is wearing your safety glasses. There's nothing worse than drywall dust in your eyeballs, and you never know if this spiral cutter might break off or something. So wear your safety glasses on your eyes. And when you're cutting with this tool inside a framed opening, you want to go clockwise with it. So we're going to go around the opening this way. If we're using it to cut an electrical box out, what would happen is if we had an electrical box here on this wall, before we hung this sheet, we would have marked just the center of the box, so we'd end up with an X, right? That's the center. We know there's a box back there. We wouldn't have screwed this off quite yet. So then what happens, you always make sure your wires, everything are packed back into the box so you aren't going to nick them with this blade. You've got the board just kind of hanging there by 2 or 3 screws. We'd plunge in where that X is. That tells us it's the center of the box. Plunge in, slide over till you hit the edge, inside edge of the box, and then you've actually got to pull out and just kind of hop over the metal. So you want to RotoZip on the outside of the box when you're doing electrical fittings. And when you're on the outside, you want to be going counterclockwise. So plunge into the center mark we marked, cut over till you know you hit the metal, pull out and just get yourself hopped over to the outside, and then we're going to continue around counterclockwise, cutting around that box. Keeping pressure against the box so that it kind of follows it and doesn't go all squirrely on you. It takes a little bit of a knack to get used to doing that. It's noisy, a little more dusty, but definitely is quick, and it gives you a nice clean cut once you get it all down pat on how to do it. So I'm just going to get my glasses on and rotozip the top part of this arch on this window opening out of here to demonstrate. Okay, so we've got our bottom row sheet here in place. We've done the last cut around that switch box over there. This is where the lifter comes into play. We're going to use this lifter. You just slip your foot in there, and you can see, like I said, it's like a teeter-totter. Once we get the end of the sheet up on there, I can just use it as a lever to lift that sheet up tight and hold it up while it's getting screwed. Something else to mention that I don't think I did is try to leave your drywall up about ½ an inch off the floor. It just gives you a little bit of room there to use this lifter. It gives you a little room, you know, if you ever get a bit of a water leak or something. Gives you a little bit of leeway that it isn't wicking up into the drywall, and hopefully it'll save you from ripping some drywall off. So I've got the lifter there. I'm about in the middle of the sheet. I'm just going to lift the sheet slightly enough to get the lifter started underneath. And then once I just use my weight a little bit to stand on it, I can feel that I'm flush over there. I'm just using that lifter to hold it up until I can get some screws in it. Okay, so that's hanging there. And I can finish screwing it off. I've also, before we put the sheet in the way, I marked the center of the studs down on the floor, just like we did up on the ceiling, just to help you as a guideline to know where you're going. So I'm going to screw this off, and then I'm going to cut with the saw and knife the bottom of this opening out of here, just to show you. So I'll just screw this off quick, and then we'll do that up. So. We're nice and flush out here on the corner. Remember, we're going to put about 5 or 6 screws out on the edge, on the joint, just to make sure it's secure. You're kind of holding the drywall back tight against the wall as you're inserting the screw. Make sure you got nothing in behind there. It's going to hold it out. A broken off piece of drywall, big pile of dust or something. So we've got that sheet screwed on there. So when you're screwing, just a couple tips, just like I mentioned. Make sure you're just putting a little bit of pressure against the drywall, holding it tight to the wall as you're inserting the screws. It'll just help to keep them from popping. Make sure you don't have any debris or anything trapped in behind the sheet, or a wire or something like that. So just kind of double check that stuff before you get too carried away with the screws. So I'm going to cut this bottom part of this window out with the saw. I'm going to make 2 vertical cuts down the 2 edges, and then I'm going to show you how to cut the bottom with your knife and cut that out of there. So you're just using the knife or the saw, right against the wood framing as a guide. cut down till you get down to the bottom plate. Same thing on this side. Okay, so we've got that. Now I'm just going to measure to see how far down I am here to the sill. I'm basically about 9 inches. So a quick way of cutting a strip or anything like that off the sheet is you want to take your knife and your tape measure, and if you can kind of hook your knife blade in behind the end of the tape measure here, hold it with your finger, use this finger up here on your tape as a guide. Once you have the right distance out, you can clamp with this hand, run this finger against the edge of the drywall, and use your tape and your knife as a guide and a cutting tool. So the way I'm going to do that, just mark where I want to be. I've got my blade behind there, put it on my mark, slide my tape up, get it snug, pinch my other finger behind the tape, just like so. And then I'm just going to simply draw my finger across that edge that I'm trying to use as a guide. And that'll give you your straight line score there. You may have to just put your blade in that slot again and give it another little shot. Whoops. Like so. And then this will just bend in there. So now I've kind of got it folded in. I'm going to use my blade in there again to cut the back paper off. And it comes out like that. It gives you, pretty decent cut. So that can make it really quick if you got your sheet leaning here and say you have to cut 2 inches off the bottom of the sheet in order to get it up off the floor a little bit. So you got your sheet upside down, get yourself all set up. You could walk down the whole length of that sheet and cut a strip off pretty easily. Instead of, trying to snap a line, follow it with your knife, cut it with the saw, anything like that. This is much quicker, and once you get onto it, you'll use that type of cut quite often. So now I'm just going to go back, clean up anything that's kind of sticking up here. If you're doing a lot of drywalling, there's all kinds of little tools that they have out there, but for the do-it-yourselfer that's just doing a few projects now and again, what I've shown you here today for tools is really all you're going to need. Okay, so we've got that cleaned up. This opening here in this case would be ready to install drywall inside there and to prepare it for corner bead. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to show you this outside corner. We're going to put a chunk of drywall on this other side here and just explain again about the overlap and what to do depending on the type of corner you're putting on. So we'll get repositioned and show you that. Okay, so we're at an outside corner here, and earlier in the video you might remember that I was mentioning, leaving it back 1/2 inch, putting it flush. Probably didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to try to clear that up here right now. We're going to use a round corner bead, bullnose corner bead like this, on this outside corner. And in order to do that, we've got to leave the drywall back 1/2 inch each direction from the faces so that this will go on there and sit perfectly. Otherwise, if you've got it out flush, this is going to rock on there, so you need it back. If you're doing square corner bead, and I'll just hold this bottom piece in place here, then you want to bring this out nice and flat and square. I mean, you could be back a little bit, doesn't matter, but you don't need it back like that. So round corner bead, leave it back so that it'll sit in there perfectly. Square corner bead, you're going to want to bring it right out flush. There's also a bevel corner bead out there. It's a 45-degree angle, flat angle across there. You also need to leave the drywall back for that. So I'll insert a picture here of the top looking down at this piece, and you'll be able to see right away the exact reason for leaving that back. Okay, the last thing I'm going to show you today is how to apply drywall to an arched opening. And we've got our arch in there. We've already hung the surface board. We need to actually line the opening now. So I've cut some strips of drywall, and I'm going to just take a simple spray bottle, wet sponge, whatever you have, and I'm going to wet the back get that wet, kind of move it around so it's totally covered. And you want to let that sit for probably, a good 10 minutes or so. Apply a little bit more. And what that does is this is the back side of the drywall. This softens up that paper on the back side there and makes it a little more pliable so that we can hopefully bend it around this curve. We've got 1/2 inch here today. You can generally buy 3/8 drywall in a lot of locations still. It does tend to work better just because it's thinner to start with. It flexes a little easier. And it all depends on your radius of your arch as well. We've got a fairly sharp radius here, so the 1/2 inch might be a little difficult to get around there, but I guess we'll find out. Okay, so we've pre-wet all our strips on the back and to help make them more flexible. For this tight a radius, we're going to use a 3/8 drywall. We actually did try some 1/2 inch, and it took us about 4 takes and 5 or 6 pieces of drywall, and that didn't work. So we went and got some 3/8 drywall. On this tighter curve, it's going to work a lot better. So we wet the back down just like I had mentioned before. Don't use too much water. You don't need to saturate it to the point where it's a mold problem or anything like that. The bit of water you're adding on there is going to dry out soon enough and not create any problems. So we've got this one ready to go, and hopefully this one works. So we want to just slowly let it conform into the shape we want. Looks like it's going to work all right for us here. So again, we're going to do a round corner bead here, so I'm leaving it back that good 1/2 inch. We'll get a couple screws in it. And you'll see once we have this all on here how nice and smooth it is. It works real well. You got to kind of work it up, make sure it's up nice and tight in there so it's not spanning across the corner or anything. Oops. Okay, so we got a nice form going around there. We'll be doing the same thing on the other side, or we normally would be. Do the same thing on the other side, and you've got your archway ready to drywall. So then we just continue on with more drywall or whatever you're using here. This could be a opening to your bar or whatever. You might have a ledge sticking out here, but whatever. Just finish your opening. Like I said, a little bit of moisture on the back of that drywall allows it to bend around that curve, and it's good to go. Okay, so that's our latest drywalling video for you. We've got many more on our YouTube channel, and we've got videos on other topics as well here on the YouTube channel. We also have the website with other articles written up. We've got a newly started forum on the website that you can go and check out if you have any questions about what you've seen here today or anything else. And we're also on Facebook. Hopefully what we did today you enjoyed and got something out of it. Thanks a lot.